for us and for me, this is really a very important relationship that we've got, and for us is really the missing link that we've struggled to fill over the last several years. So thanks again for the opportunity, and what I want to do today is, I recognize it's late, y'all have had a long day. I won't get in the weeds too far. I'll commit to stick around as long as you need to tonight to answer questions, and I'll be here tomorrow as well. But what I want to do is talk a little bit about some of our technologies, how it might help you as you consult for your customers, providing them advice on how they can start to move towards top in the market themselves, as well as how some of our technologies are currently working with the Verified Beef program and the Reputation Feeder Cattle System. As we think about creating value for feeder calves, Lee alluded to this before earlier in his presentation. A lot of factors are going to come into play here. And as I look at it, genetics is really kind of a cornerstone to that, because no matter how good your management is, if those cattle don't have the genetic material to perform, you can't force it into them. Now, we also know that you can take really good cattle and mismanage them and screw them up, right? So it does absolutely go the other way. But you have to have that foundation there to begin with. You have to have the opportunity for them to express that. And then obviously the management piece is where the vaccination programs and the preconditioning programs that we talked about all come into play. But you need to have that genetics foundation if you want to try to create value. And it's not something that comes easy. Genetic improvement is a long-term process. It takes discipline and a systematic approach to putting those genes into those cattle over time. As we look at the evolution of feeder calf value, this is a chart that Cattle Facts shared in one of their presentations last year, and what it really does is kind of shows a stepping stone or a pathway to improving profitability in the cow-calf side and improving calf value. And as we look at kind of going through the system, as we start to get to these premium programs, many of our producers are kind of at that stage. They're doing the other things right? They've got the health background, those cattle are managed correctly. What's their next step? Where's the next premium going to come from? And again, for us, that's really where we want to try to focus on helping these folks take advantage of that. To continue with the sports analogies, I view this a lot like managing an NFL team. Okay, I'm a big football fan. I'm a huge college football fan, as Larry Grand will attest to. I happen to be affiliated with a very important university. We'll get into that later. But at any rate, I look at genetic improvement like managing an NFL team. And I've got a draft every year, right? That draft is about identifying what females I'm going to retain in the herd. It's about identifying what bulls are going to come back into or what bulls I'm going to purchase to bring in as my next herd sires. Okay? And just like an NFL team, there's a variety of information that we can use to make those decisions. A bit about reputation. What college did they go to, right? What breeder produced those bulls? That's going to be important. We also need to know a little bit height and weight, phenotype, how fast they are, what's their 40 time, thinking about the combine. And we're going to do that with these bulls too. But when we're making those bull decisions, they're like our quarterbacks. We can't afford a mistake. Are they Ryan Leaf or are they Peyton Manning, right? And that's where the genetic testing comes into play. It helps us manage the risk of picking the wrong bull, okay? He may look good, he may measure right, but for whatever reason, he's not going to turn out. We need to try to hedge that, manage that risk, and that's what the genetic tools are going to do for us. At the same time, doesn't matter how fancy our quarterback is, if he doesn't have an offensive line to do the work for him and keep him standing upright, he's not going to do any good, and that's David Carr, right? I think there should be a special fund that the NFL has for quarterbacks to get stuck on really bad teams and get sacked 45 times a year, okay? So that's where our replacement females come into play. Now, we don't have to be quite as fancy with them, right? They're a little bit safer bets on average. Our mistakes aren't quite as bad, but we still need to pay attention there as well. So if we think about this like a draft, I think we can go through a couple of examples of how we might manage some of that risk, and then also think about how that translates into the verified beef programs and getting that reflected in the reputation feeder cattle program. A little bit busy slide. I'll talk you through it real quick, but the question is, how do I get there? Maybe how do I look like Tom Watkins' group of calves next time around? So the goal is to produce a high-quality feeder calf, sell for a premium, and make sure they have all the tools in place to go to work once they show up at the feed yard. So the first step's about maximizing genetic potential, and there's really two elements here. One is making sure that we're purchasing bulls with high genetics that's well documented and managing that risk. And there's a variety of ways to do that. In most of the breed associations today, the method is to use a genetic test that genomically enhances those EPDs. And what that does is it brings up the accuracy of that EPD. So if we say he's got a calving ease of 12, okay, and it's a higher accuracy value, we're much more certain that he does in fact have a calving ease value of 12, okay? He's not gonna, less likely to change significantly from that number. Versus that yearling bull that all he's got is pedigree, we don't really know very much about him and his accuracy is much lower. We're more susceptible to making a mistake. So looking for bulls that have those genomically enhanced EPDs. And then we also want to optimize replacement heifer selection. And there's a couple different ways to do that. For Angus cattle, high percentage Angus cattle, the GeneMax tests that we have are the tools of choice there. For other breeds, other British and continental breeds, we have a new product that's available called PredictGen. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. Optimizing health, you guys understand that, but it's the vaccination protocols, it's the parasite control. And then finally, verifying the value. You have to have some way to document it, okay? Otherwise, it's just a nice story to tell, okay? So we got to figure out a way to put it on paper and show somebody that you are who you say you are. Lee showed the same quote, so I won't go into it, but it is really important to understand how significant the footprint is of those bulls that you keep, right? We were going through a discussion. Dwayne and I were having a talk today with a producer, and we were talking a little bit about buying the bad bulls or buying the better bulls. What's the top end of that purebred sale worth over the average of that purebred sale? The thing to remember is genetics are permanent, right? Unless you go back and try to breed those genes back out of those animals, the decision you make is going to be stuck there and all the replacements that come after, not just that first group of calves. And it compounds over time. So both the good decisions and the bad decisions get compounded and then ultimately reflected in that 10-year average, okay? So that's why it's so terribly important that we make the right decisions. And Lee talked about how we look at averages for estimating the relative value of these calves and how looking at those averages works very well. But when we're buying individual bulls, okay, we're not relying on averages. We got one number to go from. We have to figure out how to make it right. So we're going to use all the information at our disposal, the pedigree information, the progeny information, which in those young bulls isn't available yet, performance data, which for many of these young bulls, they'll have ultrasound, maybe birth weight, yearling weights recorded, and then finally the genomic data. And the real key here is that it's all integrated into the same system. It's not two separate numbers. The genomic data is feeding directly in and complementing the information that's already in those genetic evaluations. There's a couple different types of products that can be used here, and I'll just highlight one of these. I50K is a relatively new product that we've got, and what it does is it leverages a lower density genotyping panel. What that means to you is the difference between $75 tests and $47 tests, okay? And it was interesting, we're looking at the trends in testing and how the availability of this I50K product is changing how many animals are being tested, and we're basically seeing that number double, okay? What that means is that for those producers that are seeking to identify those bulls with genomically enhanced EPDs, there's a whole lot more of them out there to choose from, okay? They're not hidden somewhere. There's a lot of them out there. This is kind of becoming the standard operating procedure for Angus bulls today, and many of the other breeds as well. So be on the lookout come bull sale season this fall for a lot more of these bulls that have these high accuracy EPDs and the ability to make much better decisions. What does that much better decision look like? Well, it's basically the equivalent of having watched that bull perform 1 year already, okay? If you were to go out and try to find a bull and say, is this bull really have the genetic potential for carcass weight that I'm looking for? Well, we can purchase him, and we can sit there and wait 2 years until his first calf crop is born and harvested, or we can look at genetic testing, and that for carcass weight is equivalent to about six of those records already, right? And we get that before he's even had his first calf. For some of these traits like calving ease direct, yearling weight, equivalent to effectively a whole year's worth of progeny, okay? So that's kind of the way to look at it. We're getting a sneak peek into his future performance. okay? And that's really where we're able to make much better decisions. So that's just really quickly on the bull side, but I do want to spend some more time on the heifer side now. And one of the things that sometimes gets lost as we talk about how good the market is today is that all these replacement heifers that are being retained as part of this expansion exercise are the most expensive heifers we'll ever keep. The opportunity cost associated with not selling her as a feeder, retaining her as a replacement, okay, plus all the development costs, means these heifers are the most expensive we'll ever produce, all right? And what does that mean? Well, she's got to do a whole lot of work for us before she puts a nickel in our pocket. Dr. Hughes, who many of you will recognize from Beef Magazine, did some math on this a couple years ago, and certainly before the prices we're seeing today. But if you look at it and follow the value of her calves over time and her salvage value, she effectively has to produce about 5 or 6 calves before she starts putting any profit in your pocket, right? So when we think about how important the bulls are, I mean, it's not a trivial task to pick heifers either, right? To make sure that she does in fact have what it takes to succeed in the herd. Unfortunately, for most of our commercial heifers, they don't have EPDs to go by. They don't have pedigrees, right? They're multi-bull pastures. We don't even know who her sire is. Okay, how are we going to try to assemble some information beyond just the phenotype on those heifers that we can use to rank them and select the right ones? Again, want to talk about this new product called PredictGen and recognizing there's other products for the high percentage Angus cattle, but this was one I thought you might not be familiar with and we might spend a bit of time on. And this product, in my mind, is really neat because it starts to provide us really good information on traits that we otherwise can't evaluate, okay, in a wider range of animals, all right, wider range of breeds. It can be used in pretty much any of the British or continental breeds and their crosses. Not for Bos Indicus cattle, okay, not for Wagyu cattle, and again, for high percentage Angus cattle, the GeneMax tests are the best choice there. But for the rest of those, and here, you know, where we are in the northern plains and the cattle populations up here, this would be a pretty good test for y'all. I'll admit that I'm particularly proud of this test for a very specific reason. We have done a mountain of validation work on this test. We've been evaluating this test in real-world conditions in feed yards for several years, okay? And that's terribly important, to be able to show you real-world data that shows that this test works, okay? Terribly important. And it's an unfortunate problem in the genetic testing world that not all the tests have this type of data behind them when they're launched, and I'm not afraid to admit I'm awful proud of the work we've done here. Tell you a little bit about it. It focuses on some key drivers of carcass value, and so it's got marbling, yield grade. There's an index that combines the two. It's about 65–70% marbling, the remainder of the weight on yield grade. It also provides information on tenderness, okay? And can also be used for sire verification. So we can use the markers here. If the bull's been tested with prediction, we can use the same markers and determine which bulls produce which offspring, right? Really important. Monitoring bull performance, looking at some of the other traits that aren't included here. We can drag down that bull's EPDs, right? So really nice feature. The other thing that we've done is our focus here, this is a test for commercial cattlemen, right? And we don't need them to get hung up on the numbers. We need to make it simple, right? Walk out, I say iron skillet upside the head simple, okay? Walk out, it's obvious what you need to do with this number. All these traits are scored 0 to 100. It's normally distributed. 50 is average of a reference population, about a little over 20,000 head. Big numbers are good, okay? For all the traits, right? So higher yield grade score, 100 on a yield grade means that animal's going to be a yield grade 1 or 2, all right? Makes sense? Just make it really simple. Walk out there and execute these decisions. So it's really a product that's going to focus on describing the drivers of carcass value, which, again, as Lee indicated, is effectively about half of that difference in profitability when we look at those 185,000 head worth of data that he had. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about the real-world application. because I think this is the part that you guys need to hear and be comfortable with, right? We want you to walk out here and understand this isn't voodoo, okay? This is a trial that we ran at a large commercial feed yard. We took 2,500 head of steers, sampled them at a terminal sort, right? And they were just managed to the end, right? We're just letting them do what they're going to do in that feed yard. We didn't do anything special with based on their numbers, okay? We pulled out the bullers and the chronics, but other than that, it's just the steers. Every color under the rainbow, all breeds represented, north and south of I-40, okay? So lots of variation in there. And this is the marbling predictions and their observed quality grade. And so what we see here, those animals that scored higher, in this instance 70, okay, 60% of them were choice, compared to 30% choice among those that scored 30, okay? That's a pretty significant difference, right? And you about flip that when you start to look at select. So what this is telling us is in this group of steers, fed to 925 pounds, they all got a beta agonist, they're on zilpaterol, okay? Clearly, this test is doing a really good job of ranking those animals relative to their actual performance, all right? Yield grade's actually even a little bit better. If you look at this, so what does that end up being? About 80% of the best cattle for yield grade were yield grade 1s and 2s, whereas only 25% of those cattle that scored a 30 were yield grade 1s and 2s, all right? And obviously then reflected on the other side, a lot more cattle. Only 2% of those top cattle were yield grade 4s or 5s, where 25% of those bottom end cattle were yield grade 4s and 5s, okay? The correlations here, if we look at the correlations between the predictions and the actual performance, we're describing about half of the genetic variation with this test, okay? Which is impressive. It's really impressive. That's about what that HD50K and I50K tests do. They describe about half the genetic variation, okay? And that's what we're getting out of this prediction test. So really a pretty powerful tool, particularly, again, when we think about the range of breeds that we're evaluating here, right? We also looked at we derived prediction scores on some bulls from Lee's operation, and what we wanted to try to do here is we can validate it in our own population, we can look at those correlations, but how's it look in an evaluation that's designed for something entirely different, right? Now, we certainly anticipate we're going to cover that, but how do they line up? Well, you can see they line up really well. Particularly, you know, the marbling here, the correlation between our marbling score and the intramuscular fat EPDs from Lee's evaluation was 0.7. That's remarkably high. Very, very strong correlation between the two. So again, giving you lots of confidence that you take this product to other groups of animals, other evaluations, it's going to perform very well. And good correlations between our yield grade predictions and some of the components of yield grade as well. So when we think about, for those producers that might be buying cattle from Lee's evaluation, it's going to be a very complementary tool if you use this in the heifers. Perhaps the neatest project that we've done, though, is actually this one. I really like this because it basically shows you exactly what can be done in the real world, okay? This is exactly how the technology can be applied, and you'll see the results we got. We partnered with Gardner Angus Ranch, Tom Brink, and did a little project we called Tech 2. And what we did was we found a group of heifers out of Texas, all right? These are the heifers there. You can kind of guess the breed composition. There's a little ear in those, I'll admit, but for the most part, you look at that group of cattle and you think they probably have a weakness in marbling, right? That'd be fair. On average, cattle look like that. We wouldn't expect them to max out on marbling. So what we designed the project to do is to say how quickly or how dramatically can we improve marbling in this single group of animals by applying two technologies. One, selection based on prediction, and then two, we bred them up to some bulls, high dollar beef bulls that were top of the breed for dollar B and marbling, okay? So here's how it worked out. When we tested those heifers, they scored a 36, right? So again, they are kind of who we thought they were, a little bit below average in terms of marbling. We took that group of heifers, we took off the bottom end, they averaged 22, okay, and we sold those. We kept the top end, top 2/3, they averaged 44, all right? So those are the ones we're going to keep as our replacements in this experiment. We bred them to those bulls, they scored a 72, okay? So clearly, by going through that process of selecting the replacement females based on their prediction scores, breeding them to bulls that excelled in marbling, okay, we were able to improve that marbling score, all right? So what? Well, here's so what. These are those calves, okay? Pretty good looking calves, by the way. Pretty awesome looking grass too. You'll notice, just keep an eye on this critter here, right? So this is one of the calves, and even though they were bred to Angus bulls, they had that silver diluter, okay? The diluter gene, so they weren't black-hided, so that's important on this next slide. 95% choice or better, okay? 6% prime, 35% certified Angus beef, but a fair bit of that's because a bunch of those calves weren't black. But ultimately, $113 per head premium when those cattle were marketed, all right? They would have been in the top, I think, 10% of cattle marketed that month in, at U.S. premium beef, okay? Clearly, we were able to breed in a fair bit of value into these calves driven by marbling in one generation, right? And that's exactly how this technology be applied. Making the right bull decisions, keeping back the right heifers, okay? And then sit back and reap the rewards. Really a neat project, and I was blown away by how much we were able to change that group of animals in such a short period of time. So as we think about your customers, all right, and particularly about how this relates to then verified beef, might this test be used as we try to do that? So our first objective might be we want to get calves enrolled in verified beef so I can market them on the basis of their superior genetics and basically get paid for what I built into them. To our last producer's comments, you know, the challenge of getting paid for what I put all that extra effort in, how I built those calves up. Well, and we talked about it a little bit before, what happens if I can't get into the reputation feeder cattle program because I don't have that documentation? I don't have those bull records, okay? Maybe I'm a younger producer, I don't have that history yet. This is where the test would really come in handy, and again, both prediction as well as GeneMax can be used. You could test the cow herd and estimate their genetic merit where that bull history is lacking. You know, the nice thing would be testing these heifers, right? Because now you get two bangs for your buck. You test those heifers, you know the average of those heifers is the average of the steer mates, right? So you can now market those steer mates based on what those heifers scored, and I have scores on those heifers now. I can rank them, I can go out and make my selection decision and already be working towards improving my genetic merit scorecard in the next generation, okay? So really helps to extend the value of the product. And then simply submitting those results in to get incorporated in. We've produced algorithms that help us. I think Lee spoke to this before. Produced algorithms, you put that data, submit that data in, we know the formulas to convert that and then estimate those EPDs. Because we know that higher numbers on that genetic merit scorecard are going to, or higher numbers on prediction are going to get you higher numbers on that genetic merit scorecard. So selecting the right bulls, right, based on those traits that Lee described, and making sure you're selecting bulls because you're buying individuals now that have the accuracy behind it, that when you buy him because you expect him to improve carcass quality, he is going to improve carcass quality. He's got extra information behind him because he's got higher accuracy from the genomics. Keep in mind, too, that the best animals in the breed, regardless of which breed you're working with, are being born today. So we can't wait around for that to happen. We have to get that accuracy into them before they have progeny, and that the only way to do that is with genomics. And the genomic tools that are used today to produce the genomically enhanced EPDs are extremely robust. They work very, very well. Again, describing half or more of the genetic variation. And then finally, use a tool that helps you pick the right heifers. You can't afford to make mistakes. And based on the breed, you might choose GeneMax or you might choose prediction, okay? Prediction and GeneMax focus would be very similar, okay? GeneMax focus predicts marbling and post-weaning gain. Prediction, again, is yield grade and marbling score. Very similar tests, very similarly priced. GeneMax is $17, prediction's $19.50, okay? GeneMax Advantage is a bit more comprehensive panel, includes more traits, okay? Would include the maternal traits, would include the traits that cost money, right? Like mature cow size, milk production, dry matter intake in the feeding period. So it's a bit more comprehensive panel, and that would be $44, okay? But those tests are available, and again, you can have that information flow right into Verified Beef as well. So I think this is a comment that Tom actually had made about his experience in the program, and I don't know that I can say it any better. I mean, the program works. It's simple. The tools are available. They're available today, and they work, right? We don't need to wait for genomic technologies to be tested. They're well validated, well accepted, they work, right? And now today, we also have a way that you can get paid for the use of that technology and for the genetic improvement that you make. And that's where the Verified Beef program comes in, and the Reputation Feeder Cattle program. So again, we're really excited about the opportunity and the ability to leverage some of our products within this program. We think it helps us do a much better job of helping commercial cattlemen capture value for genetic improvement and make better use of our tools. So again, thanks to the folks from Verified Beef for letting us be a part of it, sharing their resource, and having the ambition and enthusiasm that they've had to work with us to try to go through this. We're really excited about it. So
to Superior for inviting us, and we're really proud to have two key team members, both Zoetis and Superior. Thanks much.